Blue Dragon was released for the Xbox 360 in late 2006. The story was written by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy. The music was by Nobuo Uematsu, the composer for most of the Final Fantasy games. And the artwork was by Akira Toriyama, the artist behind both Dragon Ball and Dragon Quest. The last time that these three men worked on the same game was Chrono Trigger, which is an all-time classic. And because of the pedigree of the men behind this game, I went into it with really high expectations. And this game did not live up to a single one. Blue Dragon is a game that is just okay during its best parts, and is f***ing stupid during its worst. And since I went into this game with such high expectations, it makes the overall mediocrity of the game feel so much worse than it probably really is. At first, everything seems alright. The story begins with a group of kids, named Shu, Kluk, and Jiro, trying to capture the land shark, which is a monster that terrorizes their village every year. But things get real weird real fast as the land shark rises out of the ground and takes the kids to a flying fortress where we meet our bad guy, Nene. And I'm sorry, but that has to be the least intimidating name for a villain that I have ever heard. The game's first major issue comes up when you get into the combat. Now the combat itself is fine, it's pretty much just an evolution of the turn-based combat that was used in Final Fantasy X. But holy shit, do these battles have some serious jank. Every time one of your characters attacks or uses an ability, the frame rate starts going all over the place. And this has to be some of the worst screen tearing that I have ever seen. This is the only game that I can think of with artwork by Akira Toriyama where it's actually difficult to look at the screen for very long. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the artwork, but it has something to do with whoever the f*** optimized this game. I mean, I played this on an actual Xbox 360, and it plays terribly. Maybe it runs better on the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X, but since I don't have either of those, I couldn't tell you for sure. If you've played it on either of those systems and you know if it plays better or not on those, let me know in the comments down below. Since the combat is completely turn-based and you can take your time to select your actions, the game is at least playable. And Blue Dragon also adds a charge meter for most spells and abilities. You have to hold the A button to begin the charge, then release it when the meter is in the orange part of the bar for maximum damage. At first I liked this because it seemed like it was adding another level of strategy, but as the game went on, I actually started to completely ignore it. The more that you charge a spell or ability, the longer it will be until it's executed. And it is very easy to charge for just a little bit too long and ruin your own strategy. So the only thing that makes this combat unique is a mechanic that can very easily cause more harm than good. And the gameplay just overall doesn't do anything special or anything that Final Fantasy hasn't already done to death. I mean, the character customization is pretty good, but it's also lifted straight out of Final Fantasy V. Shortly after meeting Nene, the children are all given orbs of light that give their shadows magical powers. So the shadows do all of the actual fighting, and not the kids themselves. And each shadow's abilities can be chosen with the job system that is identical to Final Fantasy V, except with fewer jobs. Each job has a set unique ability, then as each shadow levels up each job, they will learn additional abilities that you can use regardless of what job they are. And each shadow starts with 4 slots that you can use for whatever abilities that you want, and leveling up certain jobs will give you access to more ability slots. Normally I love this type of character customization and I will grind for hours just to unlock as many abilities as I can, but since the battles in this game have such terrible performance issues, I felt like I wanted to spend as little time in battle as I could. I actually ended up being pretty severely underleveled as I started approaching the end of the game. There was one boss fight in particular where I was trying to fight it at around level 34 or so, but from what I could see online, I probably should have been closer to level 40. And when I realized just how much grinding that I would have to do to catch up, I just kinda gave up on the game. I usually don't like leaving these games that I'm reviewing to be unfinished, but with Blue Dragon here, I just decided I didn't want to put any more time into a game that I know I'm not enjoying. And I really don't care about seeing how the story ends, because to be honest, the story, and even all the characters, are all pretty stupid. Okay, something I want to mention right off the bat is that in the game's manual, these characters are all supposed to be in their late teens and early 20s. Maybe it's just me, but nobody looks a day over 16. And the only character that I found myself forming any sort of emotional bond with is a robot that we meet about 2/3 of the way through the game. Also, I really hate most of the main cast. Our main hero Shu is an obnoxious dumbass. Kluk and Jiro are both oblivious morons. Zola's alright, and Maru Maru has to be one of the most annoying little shits that I have ever seen. I hate any character that talks in the third person, his voice is annoying as hell, and why does he have to hump the air every time that he talks? The world is neat with the whole ancient technology, that super advanced thing going on, but I just don't care enough about any of these characters to get invested in this world. And by the way, there is so much random shit that you find just all over the place. But I really don't care enough about this world to explore it thoroughly. Also, Nene has to be one of the worst villains that I have ever seen. I've already mentioned that his name just isn't threatening at all, but he also doesn't seem to have any kind of real motivation for anything that he does. Anytime that he starts doing bad stuff, it seems like he's really only doing it because that's how he gets off. And the overall story just feels just as uninspired and phoned in as the soundtrack does. I love Nobuo Uematsu, and I've called him the John Williams of video games many times before. He is by far not just my favorite video game composer, but my favorite composer of all time, period. But this is just not his best work. I would even go so far as to say that it's one of his worst soundtracks. Everything feels like it was just whatever leftover scraps that he could pick up from the cutting room floor of the PS1 Final Fantasy games. I wanted to like this game, I really did. But after 30 or so hours with the game, I just kind of had to admit to myself that the game did not live up to my expectations and it was time to move on with my life. Like I said, I usually try to finish every game that I review, but for Blue Dragon, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Thank you so much for watching my review of Blue Dragon. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and let me know about it in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I upload most Saturdays. Follow me on Twitter, and I hope to see you next time.